and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'll be discussing the 2014 horror film It Follows, as directed by David Robert Mitchell. In the film, we are introduced to Jamie Height, or simply Jay to her friends, as played by Maker Monroe, who, after a night of seemingly innocent sex with her new boyfriend Hugh, as played by Jake Weary, is then stalked by an entity which can take the form of anybody, be it somebody she knows or just a random person in the street who she can only see, and those who have already been afflicted. And that, albeit very slowly, this thing does not stop in its relentless pursuit of its victim. The entity is passed from person to person like a sexually transmitted disease and latches onto the next person in the chain after they have had sex with somebody afflicted, until it claims them as the victim, reverting back to pursuing the person last in the chain thereafter. The entity is slow but persistent, which just kind of makes the horror in this movie all the more delectable and believable overall. You're always kind of going to get caught off guard with such a thing. You think you can outrun something so slow, but eventually it always catches up with you. We follow Jay, her younger sister Kelly, as played by Lily Sepp, and their friends Yara Davis, Paul Buldan, and Greg Hannigan, as played by Olivia Lusardi, Kay Gilchrist, and Daniel Zavato, respectively. Hopefully I got all them right. As she so basically desperately tries to avoid the unstoppable force that is always emerging from the shadows, trying to prove she's not going crazy and trying to find a way to put a stop to the sinister curse that has befallen her. So, this movie is so excellently simple in its design. It's sublime. It really is. And tremendously creepy, really. The way that it is constructed to attack your senses, rather than kind of fill the screen with gore and gruesome kills in order to get its shocks, is nothing short of a real kind of mind bend. And that's certainly where this movie draws its strength. The whole ensemble is crafted to terrify using the power of suggestion rather than kind of like a full-on visual display. The horror here is understated, to say the least, but I just can't stress enough just how much this film really gets under your skin and into your mind like an infestation. From the very start, this film is unsettling, as it puts you right in the front and centre with a jolt. It does borrow very heavily from John Carpenter's 1978 movie Halloween, absolutely. And the movie is blatant in this respect, to be quite fair, with very similar cinematography, very similar cinematographic style, music, and really the intense build-up of suspense, using the kind of very distinct camera angles and suburban background so prominent in that movie. A number of scenes are even almost a direct copy. But all of this aids in the build-up of suspense, and the premise of the movie is so unique, having absolutely nothing at all to do with Halloween, the movie, that is, that it doesn't feel like it's being copied. More than it's paid, a good homage to Halloween, and kind of recognise the splendour and the artistry that went into the creation of that movie, utilising the direction and the cinematography to create something of a real worthy tribute to the movie, in my opinion, at the very least. As I touched on a second ago, this film contains very little in the way of special effects. Practically no gore, and technically no real monster to speak of, not physically. Now, I don't mean that it's not real at all. that is established in the movie. There is something there. But the fact that the creature only ever actually appears as a human, that's it. The film builds up a tremendous unsettling feeling of paranoia throughout, and a real kind of menacing edge based on nothing more than a person walking. That is it. But therein lies like the real brilliance of the film. You know, there's something very disconcerting about an entity that cannot be stopped, that can't be seen, and because it appears as a human, can't be easily distinguished. And add to that it can change its appearance. You know, the way the film makes you feel and the way that it haunts every inch of your being in such a simple way. Exquisite. Its effects are long-lasting as well. It leaves you with a real unsettled feeling. I can't quite put my finger on it, but you can just sense that it's still there, kind of haunting your subconscious as it goes. You will find yourself looking at people in the street and wondering, you know, I dare you to watch this film and not do that. The entity is very sexual in nature. Its very existence is like a menacing and macabre sexually transmitted disease. It does appear in a number of occasions in fairly sexually suggestive ways. And the way that it hunts and latches onto its victims through a sexual act, it just kind of embodies all of that. But the film kind of carries a double edge kind of way at looking at the premise when it comes down to sex, basically. The act of sex is what caused the entity to stalk its victim in the first place. But then sex can also fix the problem. Well, temporarily, at the very least. So in one instance, you could say that the film acts as a warning against sex. And then in the other hand, you could say that the act at least provides some, even if momentary, release kind of from that sinister, unrelenting force. It certainly provokes a lot of questions, and in this respect is much more than just a straightforward horror. And I think this is why, on some level, it really hits a nerve. And I must say that although it is sexual in nature, it's at the very core of the movie's premise. It does this without being vulgar or obscene. You know, there is nudity in the movie, but this is not gratuitous, and it is reserved primarily for the entity itself as kind of a means to convey its form and kind of like a hint to its being and its mode of living, if you like, its modus operandi. The movie does invoke lots of other interesting questions as well about the entity itself. You know, where does it come from? Why does it feed? What does it take? How does it sense? The movie kind of makes no qualms and is really unapologetic for never actually answering them. You know, none are relevant to the horror. You know, and not knowing makes it ever the more scary. I was, you know, just sat there just itching to have them answered. But after all of it, you know, I'm certainly not disappointed that we didn't. What we get is just simply unadulterated horror in its purest form. You know, the entire cast, they're absolutely excellent, particularly Maker Munro, who together make the whole series of events believable. And that, you know, and really do help you connect with the characters on such a level, which is somewhat unprecedented for many a horror film. It really is. It is cleverly constructed to, you know, to merge the horror into the kind of the background, into everyday life, with the entity ever present, kind of slowly making its way towards you. And that is really, it's part of the exceptionally clever part, because the characters make the whole thing so believable. You do really start believing yourself. Interestingly, the movie has almost like a kind of a retro feel as well. For instance, like the movies on the TV, the radio when that's on, when they're on screen, they're kind of like mostly like the old 1940s through the 1960s stuff. Even the tech in this respect looks dated, but yet they have modern cars, mobile phones. It is kind of a bit of an eclectic mix in this respect, which adds a real kind of quirky touch. And I think gave the movie just that little bit more of a unique edge. Additionally, the music used, as arranged by Disasterpiece, had a very individual sound, very electronic, and often offbeat, and even off-key, making it very disconcerting in itself. And certainly had that same kind of retro vibe as the cinematography itself. Yeah, certainly unique, I would say, but yeah, boy, does it work. It really does. If the film had a downside, for me, this would be its ending. The whole film was based on the mystery of the entity, but by the end of the movie, it kind of becomes a little bit more generic, more of a creature feature. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good creature feature, but in this particular case, it did kind of take away some of the mystique that the film had kind of so relentlessly created in its build-up throughout. But this is only really a small gripe from me. The film, it's still left ambiguous enough at the end to remain totally disturbing. Overall, this is an exceptionally crafted horror movie, digging deep into your psyche and really touching more than a few nerves along the way. It might have a very simple premise, but it uses this to create something so creepy it will leave a mark on your mind. A true psychological assault, it really is, that will certainly get your heart pounding with its ingenious and stylish cinematography, and truly terrifying and perturbing premise. Bet you, you'll be looking over your shoulder for days. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. We have absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk. We'd definitely like to have you back. Absolutely, of course. But yes, most of all, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.